Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of September of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukrainian attack on the Russian ammo depot that is located to the northwest of Moscow, the capital of Russian Federation. This is exactly the consequences of Ukrainian attack. Currently, we don't know for sure what kind of weapon the Ukrainians were using for this attack. Maybe the Ukrainians were using drones, and lots of sources are saying about this. Maybe the Ukrainians were using missiles, long-range missiles of United Kingdom or the United States production. Maybe the Ukrainians received authorization from the Western countries. Once again, currently we don't know, and most likely the Russians will not give us official information. Furthermore, as for the Russians, they still haven't, let's say, recognized this attack, and they still haven't provided us anything about this. During this morning, we got additional videos from the same area, and in this video that took place exactly in the morning of 18th of September, we still see the consequences of Ukrainian attack, we still see fire on the ground, and we still can hear the secondary detonation. Most likely by the evening of the 18th of September, everything remains the same. Once again, according to some military Russian experts, the Ukrainians could attack the territory of Russian Federation from the territory of the Baltic states, because the distance from possible area and area of Ukraine attack is around 280 kilometers. But if we calculate the same distance from the northern Chernihiv area and to the same ammo depot area, in this case the distance is around 480 kilometers. So of course, from this perspective, the Ukrainians have more chances to attack ammo depot exactly from the territory of the NATO country. Furthermore, I'll remind you that a few weeks ago, somewhere in the end of August, we got additional updates from the Murmansk region. This is the video, and in this video we can see Ukrainian drone that was flying towards the Russian airfield that the Russians are using to keep aircrafts to them. They're using the same aircraft to attack the territory of Ukraine, and in this video the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian airfield, and the drone was destroyed as a result of air defense. And later the author of this video and some military experts reported that Ukrainians launched this drone not from the territory of Ukraine, but also from the territory of Baltic states or from the territory of Finland. So this is the situation. And for the previous months, this is the second case when different military experts and different sources reported that there are lots of cases when the attack Ukraine attack is coming from the territory of NATO countries. Now let's move to the south and let's talk about Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. We have another video between the village of Mala Takmachka and the village of Robotina and Verbova. In this video, with a very good quality, we can see the process how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, how the Ukrainian FPV drone came to this area with the purpose to destroy Russian reconnaissance drone, and then the Russians continue the process. The thing is that if we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of the month, we will see that the Russians are very focused exactly in this area, which make us think that most likely the Russians do have some plans to establish complete control over the territory and to get as close as possible to the village of Mala Takmachka from the south. Basically, the Russians are planning to get as close as possible to this prison. So let's wait for additional updates and we'll see what is going to be next. Now let's talk about the southern Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation, and as you can see, as for the 18th of September, we received significant number of icons and geolocations exactly from this area. I'll remind you that for the previous 5 or 4 days, the Russians were conducting something like operational pause without any changes on the ground. Now let's discuss in details, and first let's talk about Vadiana. The Russian sources published the video of how they were improving their positions around the village, and now we can call that the village of Vadiana is no longer just a regular village. Obviously, this is something like a flower of Vadiana, and this flower is also blooming. The Russians currently are trying to improve their positions around by taking 3 lines in the fortifications around the village of this area and as close as possible to the coal mine South Donbas number 3. As for the coal mine, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything that can confirm Russian control over the territory. We have just one video of how the Ukrainians were trying to bring additional forces, or when the Ukrainians were trying to evacuate some soldiers. We don't know for sure, but the vehicle that Ukrainians were using for these possible, let's say, reasons was destroyed and attacked by the Russian FPV drone. Now let's move to Vuhledar, and we have very interesting geolocations. Let's discuss this geolocation in details. For example, in this video that was published today on the 18th of September of 2024, we see significant Russian artillery attack on the city itself, on the northeastern part and the eastern part of the city, on the residential part. So very heavy explosions, a lot of artillery strikes, probably with aviation strikes. So what does it mean? First of all, we believe that this massive artillery attack is something like artillery preparation before full-scale offensive operation in the direction of the stronghold. Most likely the Russians are planning to attack the city in the northeastern direction with the purpose to answer the residential area and this part of Vuhledar. Just to remind you, let's increase the numbers of updates over Vadiana since the beginning of the month, and we are talking about this video. Yes, this is it. If you remember, on the 13th of September we received this video as well, and it's almost the same video as we just seen around Vuhledar. The Russians first conducted a very powerful artillery preparation. The entire coal mine was completely reduced to ruins as a result of this artillery attack, and then the Russians sent two groups of stormtroopers that captured half of the stronghold. So most likely currently we can see the same story around Vuhledar, which confirms that the Russians are ready to move further. Meanwhile, the Russians are bombing and attacking the main logistic towns around Vuhledar. This video is coming from the village of Bogayavlenka, and in this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions on the territory of the village, trying to destroy temporary positions, maybe warehouses and ammo depots. By this attack, the Russians first of all were trying to reduce and destroy Ukrainian logistic and not allow Ukrainian commanders to bring additional reinforcement in the direction of Vuhledar and in the direction of the coal mine. Now let's talk about Katerinovka, because from this area we continue receiving additional updates. For example, in this video we can see the results of counter-artillery duels. The Russians managed to discover the mortar positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, and as a result of counter-artillery duel, that position was destroyed. In the vicinity of Lizavetovka, the Russians bombed the village with the FAB, and as a result of attack, another temporary deployment point was destroyed. As for the situation on the ground, the sources reported that the Russians this morning launched full-scale offensive operation in the direction of Katerinovka, and according to pro-Russian sources, currently there are very heavy clashes exactly on the territory of the village. We don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to dig in deeper on the territory of the village or the attack was repelled, but one thing we know for sure, that this is the second or the third report about very heavy clashes on the territory of this settlement. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. Once again, yesterday we got the video that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the city by the name of Kupiansk. We have video with a very good quality that shows the Russian flags on the biggest building, on the biggest construction of the coal mine. This is 100% sure evidence that the city was captured. But as for pro-Ukrainian sources, they still claims that Ukrainians have their presence on the territory of the landfill and on the territory of the western part. So we can't tell for sure whether the Ukrainians are telling truth or not, but anyway, from the other side, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation still hasn't confirmed complete control over the settlement. So most likely the Ukrainians are telling the truth by saying that maybe there are still some resistance or some islands of resistance on the territory of this town. Now let's move further and let's talk about the area between Pokrovsk, Hrodivka and Novogrodovka. As you can see, we have some changes on the ground, and the most important changes are coming from the village of Hrodivka. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, the Russian positions on the Ukrainian side of Zhuravka river, and this is the river that split the village in two. And according to the author of this video, right exactly in this building were Russian positions, and the positions were destroyed. Based on this video and based on the report of the pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor by adding almost 90% of the settlement under complete Russian control. So summarizing everything, during the previous night, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to establish almost complete control over the village. Most likely during the next few days, we're going to receive additional updates from the territory between the village of Toretsk and Hrodivka itself, and we will color this territory also in Russian favor. Now let's move further and let's talk about Toretsk, New York agglomeration. We have significant progress on the ground. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the southern part of Toretsk, which is very important. Basically, the Russians managed to split the territory in two, and the New York, or the rest, or the things that left from New York under Ukrainian control, was completely cut from Ukrainian positions inside of the Toretsk citadel. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the southern part, and this is significant progress, obviously. From this foothold, the Russians have chances and have possibilities to move further in the western direction, to cut the Ukrainians in this area completely, and to make another attempt to create another cauldron. Furthermore, the Russians may try to attack in the direction of the landfill, coal mine, and so on. And if the Russians are able to do this, then we can start counting days of Toretsk agglomeration. Furthermore, the Russians intensifying their pressure to the west of the prison, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to enter the central citadel of the city as well. We have the video that was published by the Ukrainian sources. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainian soldiers were running on their positions to fight with the Russians. And this episode, exactly this moment, took place exactly in this building. And this video confirms that the Russians either have already entered this territory or have already captured. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Siversk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation in the eastern part of Verkhnyokamyansk. If you remember, during the previous video we discussed a lot the Ukrainian stronghold around this small lake. We have a lot of videos about Russian FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian positions. The positions were completely destroyed, and probably the Russians captured this territory because starting of the 18th of September, Russian artillery focused moved further in the western direction. So once again, first, most likely the Russians captured the stronghold that we just discussed, and now the Russians are trying to search the way how to enter the village of Verkhnyotoretsk. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. As for the southern part, after the Russian significant progress towards the village of Nevska, we stopped receiving any updates. Maybe the Russians are regrouping, maybe there are very heavy clashes already on the territory of the village. We have some geolocation from the south of Makeyevka. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were hunting and attacking the Russian soldier in this area. We don't know for sure whether we need to adjust the map in Russian favor, because the video ended not in Russian favor, but obviously the Russians currently are making attempts to storm the farms that located in the northern part of already Makeyevka and Nevska, and in the southern part of Makeyevka. Maybe during the next few days we will adjust this part of the village under Russian control. As for the northern Kupiansk, the flower of Peshchana is continuing blooming. Now the Russians are getting closer and closer to the Oskol River, and that means that the Russians are intensifying the use of aviation and FABs on the territory of the strongholds along the river. In this video we can see another FAB attack, and the Russians were trying to destroy this citadel. As for this village of Sinkovka, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor based on the video how the Ukrainians were trying to clear the basements of almost destroyed building. This video confirms that the forest to the north of this video is under complete Russian control. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kursk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation and where the Ukrainians continue their attempts to attack towards Glushkova. As for the Russians, we can make a conclusion that the Russians were more or less slowed down. We have just a small advance in the area between Darina and Byakova. In this video we can see Ukrainian flamethrower drone that was clearing Russian positions. This attack, this flame drone was flying exactly above this tree line, and based on this video we have adjusted this small part of Kursk direction under Russian control in Russian favor. We have a very huge activity of the Russian aviation, Russian artillery forces between Cherkasskaya Porечная and Pruskaya Porечная. The Russian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the entire territory, and most likely the Russians are preparing this foothold, these positions of the armored forces of Ukraine before full-scale offensive operation from the Russian side. We are not saying that this attack is going to take place tomorrow or the day after. Maybe the Russians, there are still lots of job, but anyway, this is the primary target for the Russians due to artillery concentration. And now let's talk about the southern part. We have some changes on the ground in Russian favor according to different mappers. The Russians are improving their positions and maintaining the gray zone before the beginning of the full-scale offensive operation towards the village of Plyokhova. If the Russians are able to take this village under control, then the risk of encirclement of entire Ukrainian group of forces in the Kursk direction are getting higher. Now let's talk about Glushkova territory, where the Ukrainians continue their offensive operation. Today the Ukrainian sources published lots of videos, but once again the Ukrainian attack in Glushkova region started probably 4 or 5 days ago, something like this. And since the beginning of this attack, the Ukrainians publish almost every single day another video, another new or old video, and almost every single video is the copy or the video that we used to see the day before. So nothing new happened there, nothing new was published from this direction, just old videos and how the Russians destroying abandoned and destroyed vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine. So we can say, and based on these geolocations and these videos, we can make a conclusion that Ukraine attack to Glushkov failed. The Ukrainians were completely defeated. They lost significant number of forces without almost any progress on the ground. They just took under control railways, some tree lines and the fortifications, maybe some villages, small villages along the border, and nothing more. Obviously, the target, the goal to take under control Glushkova, the Ukrainians will not be able to complete or to get ever. And I would like to finish this situation on the ground by discussing the situation in the northern part of Chernigov area. And in this video we can see number of videos of several attacks of the armored forces of Russian Federation on Ukrainian positions exactly in this part. And these we have 3 icons, 3 videos, and every single video almost shows completely different episode. We see that the Russians are very focused in this direction, and we see significant number of geolocations. So most likely there are significant number of Ukrainians that are planning to cross the border in the northern direction. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of the month, we're going to see a lot of icons that are coming exactly from this territory. Once again, all these icons confirms that there are significant number of forces, and possibly due to this concentration of forces, the Ukrainians were attacking the territory of Russian Federation. We're talking about the MO depot exactly from this point. And as for some projections and speculations, if the Ukrainians are going to attack, most likely they will try to get the road A240 with the purpose to cut this part of Russia, this part of Bryansk region from the mainland, and then it's going to be much more easier for the Ukrainians to handle with this territory. But this is not the primary target for the Ukrainians, because the main purpose of Ukrainian attack in the northern direction is to force Belarus to involve into conflict. Because if Ukrainians begin moving to the north, this will allow and this will force the forces of Belarus to be involved into the conflict and to counterattack the Ukrainians exactly from Gomel region. And this information is confirmed by the statement of the President of Republic of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. Today he stated that an attack on Belarus is the Third World War. Furthermore, Belarus expects a serious escalation of the Ukrainian conflict in September, October, and possible location for this escalation is Belarus. So I believe that this is exactly what the Western countries have prepared for Belarus for late autumn of 2024. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.